Welcome to another episode of Altitude Advantage. I'm your team reporter and host, Elisa Hernandez, alongside our lead writer, Aric DiLalla. And we have week 3 upon us. Bum, bum, bum. And a very long road trip. You excited?
A long road trip. I'm excited. I think can be good for the team to get out there, spend some time together, spend some time on the road, some bonding. But the focus has to be on this week first. A lot of questions this week about the trip to West Virginia, about getting ready for this trip before the Jets game. But don't overlook the Bucs.
Yeah.
They're a very good football team. Started 2-0 the last 4 years. I mean, if you're looking past this team to think about West Virginia already, it's not going to go well. So I think the Broncos are dialed in. They have that mentality of week 3 first. We'll worry about everything else later. But yeah, I think it can be good, but week 3 has got to be the focus first. We're dialed in.
Oh, yeah, we are. And I will say a couple guys were talking in the locker room on Wednesday, and they were getting asked, like, are you ready for the road trip? And similar, like, they were kind of like, well, let's be clear. Right now, it's going to be the same because we're going to Tampa. We're going to, play in that game. We were looking for that win. And then we'll get to West Virginia, like you said. So the players are definitely on the same page of that. They're aware that Baker Mayfield is playing some of the best football he has in his career to start the season. They have really key wide receivers in Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. There are a lot of things that we're going to dive into the podcast. But first, we're going to dive into some comments. Eric's favorite part of the show on Thursdays. So what we got today?
It's dangerous in there. You got to put on like a scuba suit, maybe some hazmat gear to go into the comment section.
We should get hazard pay for this.
I'm brave enough to go in there.
We should get hazard pay for reading these.
I'm brave. I'm going to do it. And as always, head on over to the Broncos official YouTube page. Leave a comment. We'll read the nice ones. Maybe some of the mean ones if I want to blast somebody. Blasted them last week. You know what happened, Elisa? Last week, I blasted, and they replied in the comment section. They said, no, I love the podcast. I just don't like the name.
Oh.
We're still working to bring these people along. But
look at you. Sheriff in training.
Take some time.
Sheriff in training.
Take some time. From Zachary Vergis, 1093. Elisa is a great addition to the show. She has a great presence on air. I have to ask, though, Eric, who is Phil's everything now? Elisa, that, of course, was a reference to our old show, The Neutral Zone. Phil referred to me as his everything, and I don't know, there's just an empty void in his life now, but I reach out every now and then to make sure he's okay. He's doing great. Wow, I don't even know if this is worth reading the username, but user GY2CB2RT4Y. I was rewatching Bo from the last game, and actually this guy really does look like he's got the potential to be great. It was his first game, and he looked like he was trying to figure out while being chased by guys, trying to take his head off. A lot of comments here. Blah, blah, blah. He's a rookie. It's going to take a little bit of time. This was before the Steelers game, but I think the premise still holds. And we talked a little bit about it on Monday of everybody before the season, both with the Broncos, fan base, media, says, listen, with a rookie quarterback, it's going to take some time. You're going to go through some of these growing pains. You're going to have to go through some of the ups and downs. And then it happens, and people seemingly just like forget that they have ever talked about that, right? And so I think have some patience. As we mentioned on Monday's show, there were things that Bo did better in week 2 than he did in week 1 in terms of processing, in terms of getting the play calls in, the protections, that sort of thing. I expect to see continued improvement. Everybody just settle down a little bit. I don't want to use I want to say relax, but just maybe simmer down. Simmer down. It's a process. It's the same process they're going through in Chicago.
Yeah.
Same process they're going through in Washington.
Yeah.
And at least if you look around the league, I know we're going to get this one of the nice things about the comments is you don't know where you're going to go when you get in the comment section.
It's a rabbit hole.
But you look around the league, and there's other quarterbacks that are veteran quarterbacks that have struggled to start the year. And so this is not you're seeing passing numbers down across the league.
Yep.
You're seeing passing touchdowns down across the league. You're getting to the point that Mel Kiper on ESPN on this Thursday morning was like begging for the league to outlaw 2 high safeties because he thinks it's just taking away from the beauty of the deep shot down the field. So this is a league-wide kind of phenomenon where we're seeing passing offenses.
That's a good word. Look at you, wordsmith.
Yeah, do you think that's too? You think that's too much?
No, I don't. Because if you look at what the Bears did on Monday night, when you look at even someone like Justin Fields, who has been in the league for a while, there isn't necessarily someone that's kind of hit the ground running, except for Baker Mayfield and, dare I say it, Derek Carr, and the Saints and the Bucs, who've kind of been able to really jumpstart their offense. Now, they also face not so tough opponents in the sense of, you look at what the Broncos have been able to face, and they're facing defenses that are ranked within the top 15, top 10 in the first 4 weeks. You're on the road 3 out of the 4 for your first 4 games. That's harder to digest.
Yeah.
Look at us jumping into stuff. We aren't even going to read the hater comments.
I think that the passing offense stuff, when you see league-wide trends like that, it makes you think, okay, let me take a deep breath. It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Because when you just watch your team, and we're the same way, like I get to watch the Broncos play. Right. I don't get to see every other game. I go back and watch where I can. But like when you see, okay, this is something that everybody's dealing with around the league, that makes you feel, I think, a little more reassured that they're going to figure this out. They're working through it. It's going to take some time, but they're making progress.
Yeah.
Okay, Kyle Davidson Fitness. Wow, maybe he owns a gym or something, or maybe he's just into fitness.
Flex.
Love this podcast. It's a great way to keep up to date for a long-distance fan from Canada. Let's go Broncos.
Hey. Wow. Shout out to Canada.
Altitude advantage worldwide. Wide. Warhawk66 says, loving the show, guys. Keep it up. Mike's in Paradise. Maybe that's Mike, our friend Mike Genova, maybe. Lisa's a wonderful addition to Broncos country. Welcome on board. Love the new show. See if there's any cryptocurrency, CryptoGen. Enjoying the new podcast. Keep it up, Broncos country. Johnny, Broncos fan from Georgia. Keep cooking on this podcast. You think that's Georgia the country or the... Well, he says no Broncos games in Athens, so probably the state.
Sorry, we'll cook it up. We'll cook up some analysis for you.
Mike's in Paradise also says, time for the offensive line to step up. We'll talk more about that, about kind of how this run game can get going. Scott Tower, commenters going to comment. You guys do you. People can tune out just as easy as they can tune in.
I actually saw that comment. That was probably my favorite comment. So shout out to you, because it's true. We appreciate all the engagement.
Yeah,
all the comments.
All engagement is good engagement. Paul Shatter says, I think Phil and Eric fought each other. How'd you hear about that?
Drama.
How'd you hear about that? Oh, yeah, and then here we go. Willie G, 3234. Oh, man, I like you. I just don't like the name. All right, Willie. We'll see.
Sweet 3. We're sticking with it.
Yeah. Yeah, we can't change it again. I will say, if anybody has questions, if they've got topics they want us to hit on, if they, some of our old friends on the neutral zone would ask some out there questions. It doesn't have to just be Broncos football. I like more nonsense when we can have it.
Okay.
So if you're in the comment section, leave some nonsense, leave some questions. We'll get to them next Thursday.
Yeah.
Gosh, this podcast is about to hit the road.
Yeah, it is. Look at that. Look at the advantage we're about to have, that altitude advantage we're going to have in Virginia.
West Virginia. As someone from the West Coast. You're just like, Virginia. It's all the same.
It's all the same. You're going to hit like 10 states in 20 minutes. If I drive 20 minutes in California, I'm still in my parking lot. So it's just it's one of those things. But I'm excited to kind of see.
What a West Coast bias. That's so funny. Just like all those little states over there. What even are they?
I'm just saying.
Delaware.
I'm just
saying.
Even real? You drive
Maryland.
an hour. You drive an hour on the East Coast and you hit like 10 states. You drive an hour.
That's nice.
You have an hour in California, like you're at LAX. You've gotten that far to then fly somewhere. But
respectfully, it sounds terrible.
Hey.
I like that you can just drive up, and of course I'm from North Carolina. You just drive up 2.5 hours, boom.
I like that you could just fly an hour 45, boom, in Denver. Fly an hour, boom, that's Vegas. True.
The flying harder than driving.
I just sit back and relax.
Okay, well, we're going to teach you the difference between Virginia and West Virginia next week. But that's not the focus yet.
That's not. But you know what? I was talking to one of our former Broncos, Orlando Franklin. I asked him, what is
ESPN analyst.
And ESPN analyst. Shout out to him. Can't forget that. Shout out to him for all the great work he's doing. I was talking to him, and I asked him, what are the benefits of kind of being on the road, especially like early on in the season when you're not having the best start, the start that you would have wanted. And he gave really good insight because he said, in this town particularly, this franchise and these fans really care about this team. And so sometimes like you can't really block out the noise if you go put gas or you go to the grocery store, and not necessarily that you're going to get hounded by anyone, but just, like you're surrounded by people like, man, like I kind of let these fans down, or someone says like, hey man, you didn't have a good game, but like we're still rooting for you. So you kind of feel like that weight. And it's like, sometimes it's kind of good to get away from that and kind of separate yourself from it so you guys can just focus on the X's and O's as you guys go into Tampa, because you're going against another top defense. And when you look at the Broncos and the Buccaneers, they haven't played each other that much. The last time they played was 2020, and the Broncos have won 4 of their last 5 meetings against the Buccaneers. Now, how much weight that holds now, who knows? But at least like there is some kind of track record. It's not like you're going into something where it's like, they've never beaten this team ever. It's like, I feel like sometimes psychologically, like guys will block these. First of all, professional athletes are good at blocking out everything. And most of the champions that we see have very short-term memories, but you can only block out so much. So when you kind of are in a space, you're going into Tampa Bay, you're facing this defense, which we'll get into specifically the injuries they have there. First, I got to ask you, Aric, like, what is the mentality that you need to have? How do you turn the page and just kind of say, okay, we're starting new, Tampa Bay on the road, let's do this?
Yeah, I think there is, like, if you thought people doubted you before, like now they're really going to feel that way, right? Because you're 0-2 as a football team. You're going to play a really good Tampa Bay team that, like we said, 2-0 for the 4th consecutive season. Mm-hmm. They've made the playoffs in each of the last 4 years. It's a good football team. And like you said, Baker's playing as well as anybody. Todd Bowles brings pressure like nobody's business. So, again, listen, if you thought people were doubting you before week 1, like it's only building. And I think that you've got to get back to that approach and that mentality of we want to prove people wrong. Mm-hmm. But also we've got to go out and just play our game. And I think if you look at the film, and different Broncos players have said this, there are opportunities out there that have just been missed and plays that can be made. And a lot of what's impacting the Broncos is self-inflicted wounds. And I know that obviously it stands out when Bo Nix, for example, throws an interception, right?
Yeah.
But if it's a drop pass, it's a missed assignment on a block, if it's, defensively just having those one or two big plays that you're giving up that can change the tone of the game.
That's not going to be at the forefront of people's minds when they look back at the tape. Like
right.
They're going to look at those big plays, turnovers
exactly.
and things, penalties.
But there are like small things here or there where you're like, hey, if this guy makes this catch or runs this route this way, or this running back sees this hole, I think you can turn things around relatively quickly. And listen, I know there's been a lot of talk about kind of last year's team versus this year's team. And the truth is, especially offensively, outside of the quarterback position, obviously, there's not like a huge difference in terms of pieces and like guys that are available. Now, obviously, Mike McGlinchey's on IR. That'll be a loss. We can talk about that. Lloyd Cushenberry moved on. You've got a young guy playing center, which I'm sure has an impact. Obviously, Jerry Jeudy moves on to Cleveland, but you bring in Josh Reynolds and a couple young guys. You hope that as the season goes on, it continues to be
it all meshes together. It all starts kind of getting in rhythm.
And give more of an opportunity to a guy like Marvin Mims, maybe. But I think all of that comes down to the fact that if you just do your job better, and I think Cortland Sutton said it well, particularly in the red zone, we've got to do good better, because just doing what we're doing right now is not enough. And there's certainly plays here and there where you're like, that dagger to Cortland against the Steelers.
Yeah.
The big play to Josh Reynolds, a couple of the runs, like you're like, okay, I see glimpses. Now, how do we continue to stack it together? And particularly this week, Elisa, I think the offense has to find a way to make those extra plays, those big plays, those game-changing plays. It might be in the red zone. It probably is in the red zone where you have to do that. Last week the Lions had 7 red zone opportunities. They only scored a touchdown on one of them.
Yeah.
if you're able to go down there and have, I feel like 3 or 4 chances maybe in the red zone is normal. That's kind of just a guess on my part based on kind of what you see over the year, maybe 3 to 5. Like, can you be 50 to 60% in the red zone instead of, obviously the Broncos have had a tough start here. I think they're 1 of 7 to start the year, a couple of turnovers down there. So you're not even getting field goals. That has to be part of what changes. But kind of looping back to your original question about just the mentality that this team has to have, embrace the ability to prove people wrong, but also just know that if you go out and play your game just a little bit better, that can change things quickly. And we saw a year ago how quickly things can swing and be different. And it's possible that happens this year too. And, what better way to start that by going to get a win against a good Tampa Bay team and have people think, maybe the Broncos have figured something out, because they're not going to get a lot of, I don't think a lot of people are going to be buying them this week, but that doesn't, it's the NFL, and it doesn't mean that if you put things together, you simplify some things, as Sean Payton has mentioned, you can turn things around quickly.
I mean, it instantly changes the conversation. If the Broncos go out to Tampa Bay on the road and beat the Bucs, it instantly changes the conversation, just like it has with other teams. We brought it up on Monday's podcast when you had the Raiders go into Baltimore and knock off the Ravens to make them 0-2. Week 1, the entire league was writing off that team, and now, regardless of what happened with their season, now it's like, hold on, maybe we shouldn't write them off if they're able to beat this team. And I feel like the Broncos have that opportunity. And the start of the season has been slow. 22 of 32 games have been decided by 8 points or less. That's tied for the second most such games in NFL history. So not every and both of the Broncos' 2 losses were 1-score possession games. And when you talk to the defense, when you talk to the offense, they all can literally pinpoint in the game where they felt like, this specific drive in the second, or hey, this third quarter we came out not as energetic. When you talk to these guys, they're very hyper vigilant of the exact moment in the game that they need to fix. So to your point and to your credit, when you said you just have to play your game a little better, the defense kind of did that. And I feel like when we talked to Alex Singleton and a couple guys on defense, they all said, the past 2 games have been a tale of 2 halves. And now we need both of those, the positive side of those halves, to be condensed into one game. Game 3 may be that game. Hopefully it is that game. And you're going against this Buccaneers defense that is dealing with some key injuries. And so are we. And so before we go into that, the biggest injury I do want to touch on with you is, like you said, Mike McGlinchey on IR with a knee injury. He played all of Denver's offensive snaps in Week 1 versus Seattle. You now have your second-year guy, Alex Palczewski. Ha-ha, said that right. Haters. Alex Palczewski. And he started all 65 games that he played in his 6 seasons at Illinois. So, obviously, you can't replace, but you have a guy has sat there and learned. He had nothing but praise for Mike McGlinchey as he talked about, everything that he's taught him, everything he's learned from him, and to prepare him for this moment. And he's ready to take on this assignment. And sometimes it's kind of like that something new that can spark something to open up holes for the running game to really get started. Yeah.
Listen, it's going to be a test because you've got a young guy making his first start.
He has 65 games, though. He played in 6 seasons. And he acknowledged the NFL is different. He did acknowledge that. The pacing is different. The talent is different. But he credited himself by saying, but I can do this. He didn't give this, oh, man, I got it. No, he was like, I can do this. I learned. I'm learning. Jonathan Cooper had a lot of praise for him as well, saying, man, that guy knows football.
Yeah, and I don't know if people can hear, there's rumbling going on around us.
That's how much we're going to shake up the league.
I thought it was a construction being done on the facility.
No, I added sound effects to the podcast studio.
Okay. As long as my chair doesn't fall through the floor here,
no
I'll be okay.
No promises.
I think Bo would be the first person to tell you that, college starts are not the... Yeah. You still got to learn in the NFL and figure it out in the NFL.
Quickly.
So that's a challenge for sure. But I think, as Sean Payton mentioned on Wednesday, there are ways that you can help a young guy like Alex Palczewski. And whether it's, leaving somebody into chip or, helping with a double team at certain times. That's all part of a possible plan. We've already heard Sean talk about, hey, can we reduce some of the personnel groupings with receivers, running backs, tight ends in terms of making things simpler? So in general, I think Sean Payton is taking a look at what are we doing offensively? What's the best way to put these guys in position to succeed? That includes a guy like Alex Palczewski. There are going to be times, Elisa, where he's just going to have to handle his guy one-on-one.
Yeah.
And typically the Buccaneers, their pressure comes from Vita Vea inside. As of recording this, he did not practice Wednesday, suffered a grade 2 MCL sprain in week 2. So we'll see if he plays as we're recording this. We haven't seen the Thursday practice report yet from Tampa, but
that's a grown man playing football. So
he's a difference maker. So obviously if he doesn't play, that makes things easier for Denver's offense.
Yeah.
Especially
to get things going, to spark.
Right. Especially when you think about, and I'll get back to Palczewski in just a second, but especially when you think about this week, the pocket was like a little bit of a conversation. And I love like how the narratives emerge, right? Like this week, the pocket, everyone's going to ask about the pocket and like how Bo is in the pocket. Well, he stepped up in the pocket and threw a nice 26-yard dagger to Cortland Sutton. He stayed in the pocket on 4th down as pressure's coming in his face and delivered a pass to Josh Reynolds. So I think the pocket was okay there. But Sean Payton did say, hey, early in the game, we were getting a lot of pressure up the middle in the interior of the pocket, which more than anything, as you know, like disrupts a quarterback because when you have guys coming off the edge, you can sometimes step up. When they're in your face in the middle, it makes things really difficult. And then in the second half, Sean said there were some times where Bo could have kind of stayed in a clean pocket a little bit longer, stepped up. So all that to say, if Vita Vea isn't playing and isn't kind of pushing right up the middle, it's going to help Bo. It's going to help this offense.
Yeah.
But in regards to Palczewski, there's still going to be times where he's got to hold his own.
Yeah.
We've heard about Todd Bowles' pressure packages and all the different things he can do. He can bring it from the strong side. He can bring it from the weak side. It's going to be a test, I think, Elisa, of Bo's ability to scan the line of scrimmage and say, this is where pressure's coming from. It's going to be on the offensive lineman. There's been a couple times where maybe the wrong guy's gotten picked up. And so it's a mental test when you face a guy who brings pressure as much as it is a physical one. And certainly like in the red zone, that's got to be a place where you're on top of all that stuff if you want to find a way to have success.
Yeah. And, head coach Sean Payton talked about that. Like you can't continue to get this field position and not come away with anything or come away with field goals. Like that's not enough to win in this league. And I know the Broncos defense takes a lot of pride in having low-scoring games so far this season. They were able to keep, obviously, both games within striking distance for this offense. Gave field position, plays a lot of the game on the opposing team side of the field. But when you're facing a Todd Bowles defense, when you're facing that offense, to your point, it's not something they haven't seen before. But I think with the way that they're able to take those key moments. You mentioned Vita Vea. Obviously, again, as we're recording this podcast, Antoine Winfield Jr., we're not sure of his status for Sunday's game. But, he's an all-pro safety. He suffered a foot injury in week 1, did not play in week 2. And the Buccaneers defense allows a 95.8 passer rating when Winfield is off the field since 2022. So that's also a key guy. If you're missing those two dominant presence, again, no disrespect to anyone, we understand it's the league and the NFL, everyone has talent, but it does ease that pressure of knowing you're not going to have certain people that are going to disrupt when you do get something going, right? Like you're not going to have that guy to hopefully disrupt what you're trying to create on offense, whether it's feeding the ball to your running backs, whether it's, Bo Nix using his legs to make a play, or you're just trying to drive down the field or throw a bomb down the field, which we've seen him do as well. So you have to take into considerations these injuries that are on the defensive side. We also have cornerback Bryce Hall was placed on IR following week 1. Backup cornerback Josh Hayes also left week 1 with an ankle injury, did not play week 2 in Detroit for Tampa. Now, obviously, they're still able to win because Baker Mayfield is playing out of his mind.
Yeah, he is.
But this defense is aware of that. And they're coming for you. They're coming for you, Baker.
Oh, man. Yeah, I think as far as the Broncos offense goes, one, like part of what makes Antoine Winfield Jr. so good is he brings pressure.
Yeah.
Like from the defensive backfield. I saw a stat this morning as I was getting prepped for the game.
Oh, man.
Elisa.
You guys should see the prep work that Aric does.
He needs just one sack to have the second most sacks by a DB in his first 5 seasons. Only Jamal Adams has more over his first 5 seasons. And that's, I mean, so
wow.
When you have a player like that, Todd Bowles can bring pressure. You know, does a linebacker drop and a safety come up? Mm-hmm. You know, there's things that, especially against a rookie, you can try to mess with him a little bit. So if he's not playing, I'm sure Todd Bowles is still going to try to do that with other guys, but he's obviously a special talent. So that would ease things up. I think especially, and again, we keep coming back to the red zone, but that's that's the key here, in my mind at least, is, you know, if you get 4 red zone opportunities, can you score on 2 of them? Yeah. Like score touchdowns on 2 of them and get field goals in the other. Because then you're looking at, okay, we're at 20 points. Or, you know, can you do a little bit more and get to 24? Like that's about the range I think you need to be in to win football games in the NFL. And we'll see what the pace of the game is, how it plays out. Sean Payton said a lot. You think a game is going to play out a certain way and it just goes a completely different direction. So that's all to be seen. But I did like, and I asked Bo, hey, what have you learned in college? What have you learned in the NFL about playing in the red zone? He kind of joked. He was like, I mean, to be honest, I haven't really learned a whole lot about what it takes to play in the red zone in the NFL because we haven't scored down there yet. So I liked the self-deprecation there from Bo. But
he does have a rushing touchdown. Let's not take that.
He does.
You know?
That's true. It's a good point. I should have been like, you did score. You did score. But he mentioned finding just these small yardage gains that, you know, and you think about that on that pick to Sutton in week 2 is like, I think it was Troutman. Hey, he's right down there by the goal line. He's not going to get into the end zone, but you go to 3rd and goal at the 1, right? And then maybe your options are a little more plentiful. And so that's where maybe you see some growth. And I suspect, and I think I said this Monday, that red zone is probably one of the last things to like flourish with a rookie quarterback because the game is already faster and now you're speeding it up even more and there's less ground for defenders to cover and it's just a place where the Broncos have to find a way to get better. I think you mentioned all the injuries that Tampa's kind of dealing with at the moment, but for the Broncos, they have to be able to run the ball and they have to be able to find success in the red zone. It's not specific to Tampa in this week necessarily, but you got to find a way to do it to have success moving forward.
And I think one of the things that's going to make this team successful is the fact that Baker Mayfield has not necessarily played well against defenses led by Vance Joseph. So we're going to give our guys some love because we've been talking about Todd Bowles' defense and everything that they're doing in Tampa, but Vance Joseph's defenses against Baker Mayfield. Mayfield is 1-3. He in those 4 games, he's only thrown 7 touchdowns, but 5 interceptions in those games. I can feel Alex Singleton just like dreaming of that and being like, oh yeah, like I got you, I'm your nightmare. But you know, he's 1-3 in those matchups. He's also posted a 3.8 passer rating. His only win dates back to his rookie season in 2018. So
yeah, I mean. It's true, 1-3, and obviously the win-loss record is important. I don't want to suggest he's been bad by any means because certainly
he still puts up numbers, but you make him uncomfortable, and that's when you're facing a quarterback that is dynamic and can put yards up. It's like you have to try. If you can't necessarily stop him, it's the same approach that the defense had against or the team had against T.J. Watt last week, where it's like we're not going to stop T.J. Watt completely, but we can slow him down. We can make him uncomfortable. We can disrupt what makes him so dominant. Yeah.
And, you know, with Baker, obviously he's playing as well as anybody in the league right now. His is tied for the most pass touchdowns. Passer rating is 2nd in the league. Pass yards per attempt, 2nd in the league. His, I mentioned the pass rating, 129.1.
Yeah.
I mean, he's in
this season.
Yeah. And if people remember, the last time Baker played the Broncos was that Christmas Day game in 2022 that went obviously very poorly for Denver. So I think Broncos fans are aware of what Baker Mayfield can do against Denver specifically. And again, some of this is less relevant because Vance Joseph wasn't the D coordinator for all of this, but a 230.3 pass yards per game, 5 touchdowns, 1 pick, and almost 100 passer rating. So like
that pick. I'm just saying.
I do think in general, the Broncos are going to need to force a turnover or two. I just think and they did it in week 1, right, where they got the pick early in the game. I think with a young quarterback, it's important to stop teams and hold them to, last week, obviously 13 points. But I think you also have to find a way to give Bo Nix and this offense short fields. And they weren't able to convert in week 1, but the more that you're able to say, hey, instead of having to drive 75, 80 yards, can you drive 30 or 40? Like, those are the situations where I think you can flip games. And so you're going to have to find a way to do that. It's not going to be easy. The one thing I really respect about Baker is his ability to run the football.
Yeah.
I mean, he's going to take off. He's going to lower his shoulder. He's going to try to juke you. He's a physical guy. He's like the ultimate competitor.
Did you see when he had a career high 11-yard touchdown rush and they
so
asked him about it?
sad.
He was like, "Are you serious? That is so sad." It's hard. It's hard to score rushing touchdowns in this league, especially as a quarterback.
Yeah.
They coming for your head.
But he also is just so like I think back to that 2018 game, which is that game that they defeated the Broncos, the game that Von Miller, if people remember, I believe it was when he had his 100th career sack. Might have been when he passed Simon Fletcher. It was one of those two. So within a sack and a half of that moment, but like the Broncos just kind of battered him all day. He comes back and he leads a drive to win the game. And so this is a game where you're not going to be able to. You don't win football games in the first 45, 50 minutes. You can certainly lose them, but like this defense is going to have to be ready to go against Baker the whole day. They just went to Detroit, played a really good Lions team, found a way to win.
Yeah.
And the weapons that Baker has are really impressive.
Yeah. We have Chris Godwin. We have Mike Evans. And, when you look at who they're going to be lining up against, you have Pastor Chance II, as well as Riley Moss. And I caught up with Riley Moss a little bit after Wednesday's practice. And
Plug?
he talked, name drop a little bit. He talked about that challenge and he said, like, after practice, I was talking to Pat. I was trying to get some tips from me. He credited Pat's eyes and the way that he's able to track the ball. And he's like, I'm trying to learn these things because every week the other team is going to test me just as much because I do have Pat across from me on the field. And so when you look at this Denver defense, they're tied for 10th in fewest points allowed per game, ranks 9th in fewest yards per game allowed so far this season, which is positive to see. But they're going to face the Bucs team that's ranked 13th in the NFL in passing and are going against offense that have averaged 28.5 points per game. Obviously, the Broncos have been able to temper some of the offenses that they've been seeing so far. But Pat, in particular, has gone up against the NFL's top receivers all season. He went against DK, went against George Pickens. And when you're lining up against those top guys, okay, so let's say he gets Mike Evans, who led the Buccaneers in yards in 2023, has had 10 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons. Riley Moss has Chris Godwin.
Yeah, and sometimes it's that simple. We'll see what Vance Joseph does. Do you need to put a couple of guys on? If Surtain can handle one of those guys alone, do you put a couple of guys over the other one?
Yeah.
They got a rookie that's impressive as well. This is this is as dynamic a receiving core, just like a two-headed monster as you're going to see, and they kind of do different things.
Yeah.
When one,
they're explosive in different ways.
Yeah, and when one doesn't have like the best game, the other one is able to step up. I think Mike Evans is right up there with the most underrated receivers, like in history. I mean, he's at 10 1,000-yard seasons to start his career, and he's not talked about kind of the same way that some of these other guys are, but he is just as good. And back in 2020, they played here with Tom Brady, I think Mike Evans had 3 catches for like 1 yard because he had one that went backwards, but it was 3 catches for 1 yard and 2 touchdowns because they threw it to him twice at the 1 yard line. And it's just like, what are you supposed to do against a guy that big? I mean, he's huge.
Yeah.
Pat Surtain this week talked about the penalties that he got called for against Pittsburgh. And I do think that's worth mentioning,
Yeah. Adjusting in game.
Obviously Pickens has this stat line of 2 catches, but there's also the pass interference call that he draws down the field. That's a big moment. So you do have to put that into the context a little bit. But this is where like Surtain's a physical cornerback. He said he's not going to stop playing his physical style against Evans. If they are matched up, and we don't know kind of what the defensive plan is there.
Right.
Like I'm excited to see these guys battle because they are 2 big dudes that are just going to, especially in the red zone, like they're going to go at it. And so that's exciting, I think, to have be a possible matchup. It's a big test for Riley Moss, like you mentioned, going against Godwin. The Bucs have run the ball really well. As we've talked, Sean Payton has said, it's got to start with stopping the run, and he's not pleased necessarily with where he's talked about the Broncos offense a lot, but also he mentioned, hey, if we don't get the run defense cleaned up in a better spot, we're not going to be able to win football games. It's going to be difficult for us to win football games.
Yeah. Alex Singleton touched on that a little bit after Wednesday's practice and kind of just said, like, we're aware of what the dynamic pieces are, but we also have our key guys that are looking to make plays, that are going to make plays. Zach Allen is one of the best in the league right now to start the season in quarterback pressures and those quarterback hits. He just came off a really good game against the Steelers.
Yeah, he was really good. And I think I saw this on Twitter. If you look at pressure rate and how often teams are getting the quarterbacks, Vance Joseph's defense is right up there near the top of the league. Obviously, he likes to send a lot of pressure, not all that dissimilar to Todd Bowles.
Yeah.
But he talks about sending pressure at the right time, sending pressure with a plan, not just doing it to do it. Like, what's the down and distance? What personnel grouping are they in? What are you trying to accomplish here? But sending pressure doesn't work if you don't hold up on the back end. And so what I think has been impressive, especially last week against Pittsburgh, was that, there were some penalties called, but Riley Moss, PJ Locke ends up getting that unnecessary roughness penalty, but Riley Moss is in perfect position to make that play. Pat Surtain a couple times, especially in Seattle, good place to knock the ball away. And PJ Locke at safety, Brandon Jones, playing more snaps. When you have a back end of your defense and your secondary can cover, and you can also bring pressure, now that's a recipe for success. Because if you're bringing pressure and you can't cover on the back end, they're just going to pick you apart. And so it's got to work hand in hand, rush and coverage. And against the Bucs, again, maybe that's a chance to force a turnover, to get a pick. Can you get a strip sack? I mean, those are the sorts of things that change games. I'd love to see the Broncos be able to do that. But the run game too, Elisa, this rookie, Bucky Irving, twice as many rush yards as any other rookie running back through 2 weeks, leads rookie running backs in rush yards and yards per carry. I mean, they're firing all cylinders right now. They changed OCs and haven't really seen a step backwards. So it's going to be a test for this defense.
Yeah, and I think when you look at, again, the receivers, the run game, the quarterback position, they're a pretty complete team for certain things. And so when you're trying to figure out, again, we don't know the defensive plan, but just looking at week 1 and week 2, talking about Pat in particular, he was lined up against DK Metcalf, 88.9% of coverage snaps. In week 2, he was on George Pickens 50% of the time. And obviously with guys like that, like you said, they're physical, they're big, they know how to make plays. They don't necessarily have to go for the bomb. Like you mentioned, Mike Evans had that crazy stat line and he just had 2 touchdowns with 3-4 yards, et cetera. But you want to phase them out as much as possible, right? And so I think when you play them by committee or you have Pat shadow them a little bit, you cause that disruption. And I think Riley Moss in particular, I think that's why he's smart to take pointers from Pat to say, okay, if you got Mike or you got Chris or whoever you are lined up against, what do I need to do to at least try to match that speed so that we don't get beaten because I missed the cue and things like that. And he talked about adjusting in game and just understand, like, yeah, like not every game's going to go your way. Some calls are made in some games, some calls aren't made in other games, but that's not an excuse to get that penalty in the end. Because when we talked to the defensive players on this team about just drives and things, they specifically said, like, I can pinpoint the drive, especially in the Steelers game where we gave up a PI that gave them great field position in our territory, and then we gave up that corner touchdown. And then after that, that was it. That's all they did on offense, but that's all they need to do on offense. And so for this defense in particular, they take a lot of pride in being like, no, we need low-scoring games. And I believe it was Riley Moss after that game in the Steelers that he said, I thought we were going to make them score less. So they all have that hungry mentality of being like, we don't want them to score at all. And it's not a direct reflection on what they think of the offense. It's just defense wins championships, defense sets the tone, and that gives your offense opportunity to take more risks and go downfield and kind of make those big plays.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I think if you kind of the big picture for this team is that the defense is playing well enough right now to give you a chance, right? And that's what you are asking for.
Yeah.
If you're the Broncos, and can they make a couple more plays here or there, be even better? Sure. Can they get some turnovers? I think that would really help. Obviously, we saw it fueled the win streak last year, but Zach Allen, I think he was talking to you, I think it was after the Steelers game, about how last year, if they weren't getting turnovers, they were just letting people go down the field kind of left and right. That's not the case this year. And so that gives you, like, if you're looking for a reason why the Broncos can turn this around, get the win against the Bucs, get going a little bit, win a couple games in a row, I would say the way the defense is playing, if the offense can just turn it up a little bit, and it's not that they have to go score 35 points, but if they can turn it up a little bit, be better situationally, obviously 2 of 12 on third down last week, that's not going to cut it. You got to be better there. But if you can be better in the red zone, like even marginally, be marginally better on third down, avoid the turnovers. But like just offensively, if you can just take some gradual steps here over the coming weeks, the way the defense is playing, now you're going to have a chance to win these football games. And so I think it's not like both sides are struggling or the defense is only getting stops when it gets turnovers.
Right.
The defense is playing, as well as it's played in a while. And I don't love comparing like different teams because there's always more context, but certainly the defense has gotten off to a nice start this season so far, certainly better than this time a year ago. And so if you're able to just get that offense cooking a little bit, maybe you rev it up a little bit, like the engine, you get it to start running. Mm-hmm. This defense is playing well enough that you're going to find yourself in position to win games. And if you're a fan, I think that should give you like reason to be excited, reason to be hopeful here moving forward.
Yeah, and to give Zach Allen his flowers, he has recorded 13 total quarterback pressures this season, which is tied for fourth most in the NFL. And I did ask him after that loss against Steelers, how does your play become infectious to the rest of the team? How can what you do on the field kind of trickle down to these guys to either motivate them or get them hyped and things like that? And he just credited, that they're always in it. And he's like, I know what we have to clean up. And they've all talked about penalties and clean football. I did ask Riley Moss that on Wednesday. I said, you guys have preached about cleaning things up. How confident are you guys that you guys are going to do that going into week 3? And he said he's very confident. Like, it's one of the things that they've preached to each other and just held each other accountable. And we talked a lot about that over the first couple of podcasts, is momentum, accountability, resilience of this team, the ingredients they're kind of piecing together to create the identity that they're going to have going forward. I feel like everyone on this team has kind of talked about like the turning point and how the next couple of games are going to define what they're doing here.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you mentioned, it's this week first, but then a chance to do more and hopefully use that week in West Virginia, which is not Virginia, to help this team.
How long have you been holding that in? Since the start of the podcast.
About 40 minutes. Have you been to Tampa before?
I have.
You've been to the stadium?
I have.
Okay, so you know about the cannons.
Massive stadium. Yes, I know about the cannons.
They're scary.
I mean, I'm from LA. Not that scary.
The cannons don't scare you?
Loud noises don't scare me.
Okay. I mean,
but yes,
we were down there in Tampa and they're firing off the cannon. I'm like, what is going on?
It is scary when you have no idea. Well, it's scary when you just think it's a prop. And
It's
it actually
loud.
doesn't do anything. And
Shakes
then
the press
you
box.
realize it does. Yeah, I didn't realize. I will say, my first game there, I went to go see. I was there working, and I saw the Bucks play the Cowboys, and I thought it was a prop. And I'm like, oh, that's a cute little pirate ship. And then it was like a full functioning pirate ship, and I'm just like, it's a massive stadium.
Hopefully, the cannons don't go off very much because that means the Buccaneers have scored. So we don't want to hear the cannons.
Let's make it a prop.
I've only been there. Ooh, I like that. Let's make it a prop. That's like a nice little tagline. I do remember being down there in 2016, the last time the Broncos played down there. And it just, every time it was like, I couldn't figure out exactly how long after like a score it was going to happen. And so I'd be like, is it happening? And then boom. And I would jump.
Yeah. I will say, like, taking the crowd out of it is going to be very key as well, because that stadium is, I wouldn't say it's like the loudest one I've ever been to or anything like that, but they do get really loud.
Yeah.
They do get rowdy. And when the cannons start going off, the crowd feeds off of that. And I think one thing that this defense has done well, that I think we don't really talk about enough because people don't see it as relevant, is this defense has taken the crowd out of the game, especially in Seattle. Like when we're playing in Seattle, we saw this team take the fans out. And so it was a loud environment. But when you're stalling the other team's offense and you're not giving it to be excited about, it's a little more manageable. And I think that's something that you have to consider in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I'll try not to be scared of the cannons, and we'll see how it goes. Broncos are going to try to win. I'm going to try to not get really scared.
Yeah, it's going to be a prop. I'm calling it now.
All right.
I'm calling it now. And then we are off to West Virginia. Really quick, what are you looking forward to in West Virginia? I've never been, so I'm excited.
I think that's clear.
Well, someone asked it today. They were like, hey, like the leaves are turning yellow. And I'm like, I don't know what that means.
We got a lot to LA transplant has a lot to learn out here.
You guys have seasons out here.
It'll just be, it's nice to get a change of scenery and change of pace. And like, I think back to what that Buffalo game did last year or London a couple years ago. And there definitely is an element of like, you bond as a team, and we'll see kind of, does that translate right away to wins? The Broncos in general, and we haven't talked about this hardly at all, but the Broncos in general last year did not start particularly well in early kickoff games going east. Like Houston last year, for example, Broncos almost win that game, would have been huge in the playoff standings.
Yeah.
But the first quarter, they were just, it wasn't up to their standard.
Yeah.
And some guys talked about afterwards that like we got to figure out a way to fix that. And I think that over the years, obviously Miami last year was just kind of tough on all levels, but there's something to be said for teams that go east and play these early kicks that feel like an 11 a.m. Mountain game.
Yeah.
How do you handle it? And we'll see both against the Bucs and the Jets how the Broncos do that. You got to start fast. If Tampa jumps out to a lead, especially with a rookie quarterback, if they get out to a double-digit lead, it's going to be hard to come back on them, especially when Todd Bowles brings pressure and all that. So we kind of maybe that's going to be a key. Starting fast, they got to find a way to do it, and hopefully they've got a plan. Hopefully they're ready to go and can set the tone, but got to be right from the first snap. Got to be ready to go.
That's one thing that the guys are going to focus on as they close out the week, head off onto the road. Obviously, we have Tampa Bay, West Virginia, and then we head off to New York for that Jets game, which we will get into much detail in next week as we take altitude advantage on the road.
Woo!
It's going to be exciting. It's going to be trees.
There's going to be trees.
It's going to be,
altitude advantage. There's going to be trees.
There's going to be fresh air.
All sorts of slogans.
I'm saying, look, we're setting the tone here.
Maybe we'll do some West Virginia trivia with you next week.
Oh man. Let's not. That's what we got for now. But we will be back again with a new episode next week. So make sure you guys tune in. Make sure you guys subscribe. Leave comments. Let us know any topics you guys wanted to touch on. Any questions you guys have that we can talk about on the show. Especially again, it's gonna be a very long road trip for these guys, and the next home game isn't until October versus the Raiders. So they have some time on the road before they come back and kind of reset and here for the home fans. So this has been Altitude Advantage. I am your team reporter, Elisa Hernandez. This is our lead writer, Aric DiLalla, and we will have much more. Let's go on this road trip, Aric.
Let's go.